Hey, welcome back, everybody. We are sitting in Image 24, downtown Houston, and Image is not a picture. Image is actually, well, it can be a picture, I guess. Image is actually a geophysical conference here in Houston, and I'm sitting here with John Brittan, VP of Imaging, speaking of image, and technology at TGS. How you doing today, John?
I'm good, thank you.
You had a little adventure. You had to go find some water because we didn't have any at the booth, but now it looks like we have a whole bunch over there. Imaging. When I think of imaging in the oil and gas space, I think of 3D seismic. Actually, I'm old enough to remember before it was 3D seismic.
Yes, I'm just about old enough to remember 3D, before
But
3D seismic.
One of the things that people that outside the industry don't understand, that even a long time ago when imaging was done on paper, when people were hand drawing seismic data, it was still big data, right? It's just
Absolutely.
It was in a different format.
Yeah.
And now with our ability to use technology, the amount of data that we capture around imaging is insane.
It's incredible.
But it's so useful.
Yeah. I think we don't, in the context of the bigger world, sometimes we don't think of ourselves as like a big data industry. And yet we are. In fact, we're one of the biggest data industries. I found myself last year on an industry panel for one of the large cloud providers with representatives from things like Uber and Spotify and all these sort of apps that are part of our daily lives. And in the introductions, it was all like, oh, this person's this and this. And then they sort of looked at me and us and they were like, well, what are you guys doing here? And the cloud provider was, no, this is big data. This is big data. What we do in the seismic imaging world is we collect big data. We collect huge volumes of data every day with the acquisition technology that we have. And then we spend vast amount of compute power doing things to that data, image, and creating the image that you mentioned, the sort of image, and the name of this conference obviously being image. That sort of the number crunching that goes on with that level of data is enormous. And I think sometimes we don't sort of count ourselves in with big data. Yeah, we are.
We're not only a big data industry. I would say we're probably one of the first big data industries.
Absolutely.
Right. But we're also one of the first industries to look at ways to manipulate that data to help make good business decisions. And whether that was originally Excel spreadsheets, what this industry still misuses. I've never seen an industry misuse. And Microsoft, I love Excel, don't get me wrong. But it went from Excel spreadsheets to some primitive data mining type of software, to actually big data analytics, to machine learning, and now we have AI.
Sure.
And with all of that, we're getting better and better at finding things that we need to find. So in our space, reservoirs, hydrocarbons.
Yeah.
I've seen AI using imaging find reservoirs from old seismic data that the humans missed. I mean, what a great industry when you're actually having software helping you find things that are valuable that people couldn't see.
Absolutely. I think this is one of the things I like most about this, working in this industry. And I think this is, again, something that we sometimes fail to sort of convey well enough outwards, is that we are an industry that very much uses and utilizes all the modern technologies that are being developed sometimes elsewhere. And we are underneath a bunch of scientists and engineers. And obviously we're trying to solve a particular problem. Like you say, that particular problem is usually trying to find something. We're trying to say what's where. Sometimes to make the decision not to go and find it. Sometimes go, we'll leave that bit alone. But still, we're looking for something. And you're right, there's all these technologies out there, and AI is just one example of that right now. But other ones that are a very big transformative one, I think, for our industry right now is the low Earth orbit satellites.
Yeah.
Because that is, that for me, looking at the way we work with the acquisition of our data offshore, that's going to be the biggest change in our industry in decades.
Yeah.
Because now suddenly we have a huge amount of bandwidth, low latency, the ability to essentially just stream the data out through the satellites, and that's a big change. And that's a technology. It's not a technology that we as an industry have developed ourselves. This is technology that it's there now, and we can utilize it. And I think that. AI, another good example. I mean, we're good at that again, and we have the data, to do it. Sometimes it's like, we have a problem we're trying to solve. And it's always, okay, let's how, like you say, how do we try and solve that particular problem? How do we get that right image? And, all these technologies really help us.
John, we were get along so well. I could geek out as soon as you said low Earth orbit satellite. I'm like, okay, this guy's one of my brothers right here. Because and the audience knows I could spend hours talking about the technology because I love it. It's fascinating when you get to see it, play with it, see what it does. But I don't want to get too far away from what we're here for. So when I think of companies that can help the operators use their imaging data in a way to solve business problems, finding hydrocarbons, or actually you brought up a great point, knowing when not to spend money looking for hydrocarbons because they're not recoverable. They may be there but not recoverable. One of the first companies I think of is the one you work for, TGS.
Sure.
Y'all have done a fantastic job of learning how to walk in and basically, I would say, streamline the crunching of this data to help the operators get there quicker than they're gonna hate me when I say it, but quicker than they could do it themselves, right?
Sure, I think, and I mean, we are now, TGS is a company that's evolved a lot.
Y'all have grown so much.
Yeah.
Y'all need to quit buying stuff.
Yeah, well, exactly. And suddenly now we've just grown again. So now, now with the acquisition of PGS in the last year, we now sort of really cover the full value chain. It's a phrase I like, but it's the phrase that gets used. But we acquire the data. We acquire both streamer data, OBN data. We process, we image the data, we can help interpret the data, and we really sort of can deliver you all the way from, okay, hopefully, well, that's our aim always is to be able to deliver all the way from, okay, your concept, okay, what is it, the question you're trying to answer, as not for the operator, what that's the real thing that really we want to help with is, okay, what's the question you're trying to answer? Is it, shall I go here? Is it, okay, I think I should go here, but maybe it's not worth it right now. Maybe what is it's going to make economic, and is it okay? Sometimes now I am here. Do I stop? Do I keep going? And things like that. And once we understand the question, we have the technology that allows us to then enable to put something together that helps you answer that question. That's what we try and be there, is to be the partner, and that's a sort of a phrase we try and use. We really want to be the partner to help the operator go, okay, how can I answer that question? Okay, we can give you that. I'll give you that technology, help you answer that question, and more, in this world, do it as quickly as possible. I mean, the timescales constantly shrink, and again, that's a key thing from us, and a key thing for me, sort of working in the technology side of the business, is how can we help answer those questions as quickly as possible, and obviously as economically as possible, I should say.
Well, one of the other things that TGS is really good at is you understand the culture of the oil and gas industry. And if anybody's listening from outside, you can think I'm crazy when I say this. We are a big data industry. We don't always know what to do with our own data. Historically, it tends to be siloed. A lot of times it's dirty. It needs to be cleaned up.
Absolutely.
We have it, but it just sits there sometimes. And y'all understand that. And so y'all have not only the tools available, but y'all actually have the experience and the process to know that data may be in different databases, may be spread across the world. This data may be clean. This data may be dirty. You have to fool with all that before you can even start trying to crunch it.
Absolutely. I mean, we have obviously the largest multi-client library in the world in terms of seismic data, but like you say, data itself, all data is essentially worthless unless you've understood the data hygiene. You talk about cleaning the data. I mean, and I think this is something that over the last few years, particularly with the advent of the cloud technology, has become more and more apparent. It's like, okay, us, like lots of other people who have a vast swath of data at their hands, I've gone, okay, now we have this, the digital technologies, the cloud technologies that gives us the opportunities to serve that data, provide that data, use that data in better ways. But, to make all that work, that data's got to be clean. To use the phrase used, that's a great phrase. We always talk about data hygiene. That data has got to be clean, and sometimes it's not just the data itself, it's actually particularly the metadata.
Yeah.
Yeah? Because data's fine, but it's completely worthless unless you know where it is and where it came, when it was, and things like that. And I think a huge amount of the efforts we've been sort of putting in is actually making sure that the data hygiene includes all the metadata as well, so that actually, when you get the data served to you in the way you want, and then you want to allow, more and more, it's not a person who's then dealing with that data again. It's an algorithm. You're serving that data to an algorithm to, like you say, to talk about the ways that it can try and find the things that have been missed. Even more if it's an algorithm, the data has to be clean. And I think that is a huge thing that, again, we've put a lot of time and effort into, is to making sure that we have a good understanding of what we need from those data libraries.
The other thing I think y'all do that's really cool is that if I wanted to stand up an operating company, if I wanted to go drill offshore somewhere in the world, I have a couple options. I could hire for the experience and the knowledge, which is really hard right now because a lot of experience and knowledge is retired, has left the industry, right?
Absolutely.
Or I could come to TGS and go, tell me what's best practices based upon real facts, and y'all go, we can do that.
We can do that, absolutely, yeah. And I think, again, it's about the size of the world, as it were, really. I mean, again, we are lucky in that we have a large data library that spans, I think we probably say now pretty much every sort of basin.
Every major basin in the world. It's incredible.
Is there again through essentially all the acquisitions of the companies that have come together within TGS now. Essentially, yeah, if you want to go somewhere, we pretty much have got some data there. And even now as well, into the world of the sort of the new energy world as well, we're into sort of places where are not traditional oil and gas basins, but we're out shooting seismic for wind and for CCS and things like that, where, okay, oh wow, actually, we've even got data in places you wouldn't even expect. So, yeah.
That's exactly where I was going next. Dude, you're one of the best podcast interview I've done in a while, just because you're making it flow. You're making it easy for me. I could just be quiet. All right. So, but it's exactly where I was going next is, traditionally, when I think of TGS, I think of oil and gas, I think of hydrocarbons, but y'all now veered outside of that. Carbon sequestration and storage is a business, and it's a business that's going to continue to grow. It's going to be profitable. But once again, it has some of the same limitations as exploring for hydrocarbons.
Absolutely. No, I mean, carbon capture has. I'm sitting here looking straight across, looking at people us. Talking about carbon, in the carbon capture. It has. It's a very interesting problem technically, because it's a different problem. It's putting it in there rather than getting it out.
I know.
And keeping it in there. Yeah, it's an industry that is very interesting technically. We have to, different to oil and gas, we have to try and put it in there and keep it in there rather than take it out. And it's actually also got, it's likely to have, because obviously this is evolving right now, quite a different economic model.
Yeah.
The economic model for oil and gas is actually, and I'm not an economist, as you probably tell, it's actually very simple.
It's very simple.
Yeah, you get it out of the ground, somebody pays you for it.
Yeah.
It's a very simple model. For carbon capture, it's actually much more complicated. It's like, somebody's got to pay us to put it in there and then keep it in there. Well, who's paying? And things like that. So there's all kinds of interesting things with that, but we absolutely see, that we have data that makes it work. We have the data that will make the carbon capture industry work, because we understand the basins where people are going to want to put the carbon and capture it and store it. So we absolutely see we're a key part of that. And I think for us, what we're trying to do is be part of the conversation, because right now, in terms of not just the economic model but the regulatory model as well, there's a sort of conversations between the operators, between the regulatory bodies, and we want to be part of that conversation. So actually, because we have the data sets, because we can enable a lot of this, and because of particularly as well, we can enable monitoring technology as well, in terms of understanding what and how often you actually go and check everything's still okay there. I think we very much have sort of see ourselves as a key part of that business, and that business, you're right, it's going to evolve. And I was talking today I was in a talk today listening to one of the operators talk about they've just been modelling carbon storage for 1,000 years. That's quite a good industry if it's going to be lasting for 1,000 years. It'll outlast me, I think, just maybe. But 1,000 years is quite a good thing to be thinking. Okay, this is something we're going to have to be thinking out there.
Yeah, it's a shame this isn't an economic show, because I could go deep into the idea of taking carbon dioxide that the operators used to have to buy.
Yes.
And now they're using it or they've been using it for well simulation forever. All it basically does is add energy to the oil. But now you can almost get a double return on your investment, because not only is somebody paying you to take that carbon dioxide that you used to have to buy as a product, and you're still using it for well simulation, but then if you do it right, you lock it up in the reservoir, and then you get paid again. It's genius.
Yeah.
I mean, from an economic point of view, it's just literally genius.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I say, the economics is very interesting there, and that's something that we sort of have to sort of find our way through. It's a little different to the obviously the economic model we're kind of used to. And I mean, the economic model, it isn't an economics podcast, but hey, we can go into it, the economic model we're very used to is we are sort of, okay, we provide the data and the operator takes the risk and the reward kind of thing. That's how it works as well. Whereas in this case, it might be slightly different, because again, there's a sort of more, and again, I use the word partnership. I think that's, again, we are very much in the world of carbon capture, trying to be more sort of more this towards a partnership where, again, we're part of it because, of course, we bring something to the table in terms of data.
Yeah, I will say this about you, your company, and your sales efforts. Your sales team does not go out and try to make people buy stuff they don't need. I love your sales team. They actually are looking for real partnerships if they can help.
Yeah.
You have a sales team that tells people, no, we can't help. Not too many sales teams do that in today's world.
Yeah.
And if you're listening, audience, and you haven't experienced that yet, just reach out to TGS, see if they can help you, and I promise you, they can help you, they will. And if they can't help you, they will tell you they can't help you. Love your sales organization, which we do have a sales and marketing podcast, but once again, this is not it.
That's not it.
This is the tech show, so we need to go back to the technology. So we talked a whole bunch about hydrocarbons, imaging, big data analytics, machine learning. Talked a little bit about culture. We talked a little bit about carbon capture and storage, which I think will somewhere in the future will be another part of the oil and gas avenue.
Yeah.
We're the only industry in the world that can do these huge CapEx projects all over the world on budget, on time, and that's what I see later. But CCUS is still in its infancy. But you mentioned wind.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, this is one that for us it's been a very, in some ways, a very simple transition. In that with offshore wind farms, they want to understand the subsurface, like oil and gas wants to understand the subsurface. Admittedly now just the really, really shallow part of the subsurface, obviously, to just understand where to put their piles. And geophysical imaging, seismic imaging gives you that opportunity. Now, that's an industry which has traditionally been, it's been quite sort of, I was going to say, be rude, low tech, maybe, in terms of that, we've been generally just being 2D seismic rather than 3D seismic. And I think very much we see, okay, this is something where we can start actually sort of moving the technology forwards within that industry. And again, also move things quicker. This is, again, an industry, when you start to understand it and think about it, where the sort of time scale between concept to actually the wind farm being in operation takes a long time. And now a lot of that is regulatory, again, but a lot of that also is there's a sort of quite a slow process in understanding the subsurface and understanding, the piling, the operations that need to have. And there's quite a different sort of technical discussion as well to be had there. We are sort of our learning process, if you want to call it that, within the world of wind has been, we're very used to the sort of technical conversations we have with oil and gas operators in terms of translating the images, geophysical images, and understanding, what's happened to sort of in the process to get to where the image is and what the image means and what the limitations of the image are. The wind community, the engineers building the wind farms, obviously they look at things from a slightly different point of view. They're much more coming from a geotechnical point of view, and therefore, part of sort of the learning we've had to do is how to have those conversations again, how to say, okay, this is what the geophysical image means, and this is how it then translates towards the sort of the geotechnical understanding, and then translates into actually it's all the way back fundamentally to the question you're trying to answer. I mean, generally the question you're trying to answer is, if I put the wind turbine there, is it going to fall over? We've had to learn.
I never even thought about it, but just listening to you talk, it's like, okay, there can't be that bit much of a difference between building a production platform in the Gulf of Mexico in 100 feet of water and building a platform to hold up, a windmill in the Gulf of Mexico. As far as, I mean, of course, like the engineering stresses and everything will be different, but you're still having to figure out uplift and static loads and compression. It's all the same stuff.
It is, but of course, actually, as a seismic company, we're not generally talking to people who are building the platforms.
Right.
We're talking to people who about what they're going to drill down into.
No, of course, because they need that information to figure out.
So it's been quite a change to actually say, oh, okay, now we're worrying about, that first 100 meters. And of course, that also changes the sort of the seismic in its own way.
Yeah, of course.
It's like that, it's higher frequencies, it's much smaller spatial sampling. So you have to sort of go, oh, okay, now hold on it. But actually, when if you take the scales of the seismic, it just looks like seismic, yeah. And the sort of our comfort zone, if you want to call it that, so it's still seismic, but the scales change. But it is that understanding of the engineering stresses, again, and it's that understanding again of what's the question you're trying to answer here with these data.
Yeah,
and that's what we as a company. That's what we try and provide is, we provide data that helps you answer questions. That's our fundamental thing. In this case, it's just, okay, it's a slightly different data to answer slightly different questions, and that's the bit that there's the evolutionary part for us. But it's really interesting.
It's so cool to watch y'all grow and evolve.
Yeah.
If you would have told me 10 years ago that y'all would be doing stuff for wind farms, I would have said you're crazy.
Well, it's funny. We sort of had to, it's as you sort of geek out, as you go back to your imaging algorithms and go, okay, now we're going to put really high frequency data through it. You have to make sure that somebody thought about that 20 years ago when they wrote that algorithm and hasn't hard-coded things in. And some of my team took great delight in pointing out that somebody had failed to think about it 20 years ago and hard-coded things in, and that was me.
I love it.
So they took great delight in pointing out that somebody hadn't realised that at some point in the future we might be putting these higher frequencies through the algorithms and hadn't anticipated it. And that was me. I sat there and went, nobody's ever going to put... Nobody's ever going to put 1500 hertz through this thing. Why would I think that?
No.
Here we are.
So we're getting close to winding down the show, but you mentioned something earlier. You mentioned satellite data.
Yes.
Is that something y'all are working a lot with now?
Well, it's not so much the satellite data itself. It's more utilising the satellite as a throughput for us. I mean, basically, what we are now more and more doing is essentially using the satellite just as a network. So we started last year installing little new satellite dishes on all the vessels to use the low Earth orbit satellites, and that was a proof of concept. We thought, okay, this technology is now here. It offers us the potential for significant improvements in bandwidth and latency in terms of our ability to move data up and down from the vessels when the vessels are working offshore. And like I say, we thought, okay, well, we'll just, this is new technology like anything. We'll have a go. We'll get a couple of satellite dishes for the low Earth orbit satellites. We'll put them up there and we'll see how it goes. And it became very quickly obvious that this was a technology that just works. We plug it in and it just works. The data was just streaming off, and it was like, oh, okay. This isn't a technical problem. Actually, now this becomes a technology conversation. What it actually then becomes is okay, what are we going to do with the technology? And I think that is, like I mentioned earlier on, I think this is the big revolution for offshore seismic acquisition that is now coming. Is suddenly we have a vast increase in bandwidth and a vast decrease in latency, and that's a big thing. And it's also, frankly, a big thing for the guys who work offshore as well. I sort of talked to some of the crews, and they were like, well, last Christmas I was working through Christmas, but I could video call my kids while they open their presents. And I've never been able to do that before because the satellite bandwidth was not enough. And I mean, that's a huge thing.
So you're using it for connectivity as opposed to either catching the data locally, which you did for, or VSAT, which was high latency, low bandwidth.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I told you I could geek out over this stuff.
Yeah, if you want to go into satellite, absolutely. And I think what it also is doing it's disrupting that space as well. And so VSAT and people are suddenly like, okay, now we have to, yeah, absolutely, because of the height of their satellites, they had their latency, they're never going to win, but they can increase their bandwidth,
right?
And that's what they're doing, because they suddenly have seen their market completely disrupted by the profusion of low Earth orbit satellites.
So, God, we're going to go over. I don't care. It's my show. Now that you are able to look at that data in near real time, are y'all doing analytics in near real time?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we've always done analytics on the data on the vessels. As part of the the quality control process, we've always had sort of people sitting on the vessels doing that analytics, and we've always had if representatives from the clients sitting there as well doing that analytics, and that that imposes people on vessels, and the ability we are moving towards now is those people don't need to be on a vessel. You could sit with your mobile phone and you can see the analytics, wherever you are,
right,
and things like that. So, as I said, it quite quickly changed from being a conversation about is the technology going to work to, okay, what do we do with this technology and how does it change things? How does it affect the way we work? How does it affect the number of people we have on the vessels? It's the move. This is the enabler towards more and more autonomous operations, basically. And I think that very much is now, within not just ourselves, but within other acquisition companies. That's where the sort of conversation is now going. Is okay. This technology is here and it works. How do we then use it in the best way to actually, still give the best sort of service we want to give as well, but also providing, efficiency and also providing, people's lives offshore, make people's lives offshore better.
So you're making their lives offshore better, but if I follow where this is progressing, you're going to make things safer and safer because at some point there are not going to be people on that vessel.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yeah, no, and I think this is something that, safety is, it's for any marine operator, safety is sort of such a huge component of what we do. And for us, part and parcel of what we do in the technology organizations is towards reducing the exposure of our offshore teams in what is at times an incredibly harsh environment.
I've been to North Sea.
Yeah,
it is dangerous as all get out.
Yeah, exactly. It's a terribly harsh environment, and obviously what we want to do is minimize the risk. I don't think we're ever going to get. I think it's going to be a long time before we get to the point where there's nobody offshore. But it will. The obvious thing with these changes in the technology is will enable it to make it safer.
All right, so I have a question. I may edit this out or I may leave it in depending on how you answer it. I'm just curious. So you're out there collecting data for your customers that they're going to use for a lot of different reasons. Is there disagreements in who owns the data, like from a contractual point of view? Do y'all both own it?
No, we have legal departments for that kind of thing. No, absolutely not. Generally, we acquire data in two ways. We acquire data either what we call in a proprietary way or in a multi-client way. In the proprietary way, the data is owned by the client, and there is no, we are a provider of that data. We acquire it and we hand it over to them, and that is their data. In the multi-client data sets, it's our data. We acquire it and it is owned by us, and we give licenses to that data to one or more clients. So we have two quite distinct business models, if you want to call them that, but two legal models for the ownership of the data. And we have a mix of, as a company and as a company, we have a mix of those models, and that mix varies, depends on where we're operating. It depends on the economic state of the world at any point. Some days we may be some years we may be doing 30% proprietary, 70% multi-client. Some years it might be the other way around. It depends on where we are in the sort of the great economic cycle that is the industry.
I can see from a business point of view where both those models work from literally just a business point of view. I also see, I could probably name the operators that insist that it's their data.
Well, no, of course. I mean, the data in a proprietary sense is always their data, and that's, we're simply here to give, you want where you want the data, there it is, well, here it is, this is the data you want, in the form you want it, there's your handover kind of things. But the multi-client model for TGS, TGS has built its business on the primarily on the multi-client model. On the multi-client model, is okay. Again, it's back to risk and reward. In that sense, we are taking more of the risks because essentially we're paying for that data to be shot. Now, sometimes we get underwriters to do it. We try and get people to underwrite that as well as a sort of as part of the business model. But essentially, we take some more of the risk, and the reward part of that is therefore we then can sell the data n times, and in a good model, n is a large number, and that's when it works. But sometimes n is 0, and that's when it doesn't work.
Well, you have a long history of being doing a lot of successful work for your clients. Long history of doing cool stuff like sponsoring our podcast pavilion here at Image. Thank you for that. If you want to learn more about TGS, the link will be in the show note. You can try to remember it's tgs.com. John, we're going to put a link to your LinkedIn profile if people want to reach out to you directly. That'll filter out the crazies. Thank you for your time today. I could have talked to you for hours.
Oh, well, thank you.
Unfortunately, we got to wind this thing down. Links in the show notes for our 2 newsletters. Like I said, if you're listening to this and you need help with imaging, with seismic, with data, reach out to TGS. Even though I can't pronounce them, they're a fantastic company. They won't steer you wrong. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, remember, we will see you next time.